flowers, and what we're going to end up doing, let me just, I have to make okay. So today we're going to be doing flowers, and I'm not normally somebody who does flowers and stuff, but as I was getting ready for this workshop, the more that I started experimenting with oil pastels, the more fun I had. And now it's like, boy, I can hardly wait to show you some tips and what we can do. So our materials that we're going to be using, you could use any black paper, or you could use a blue paper, whatever, but I'm going to be using Legion Paper's Stonehenge Aqua Coldpress. This has a nice texture to it, and it's kind of a nice base to be able to put your color on. So we'll be using that. And we also will be using the always fabulous quality Faber Castell 24 colors of oil pastels. And we'll be using that as our main material. Okay, now, the one thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to keep things pretty simple, because I think sometimes with pastels, people can get too fussy, and I have always been one of those people that I have a tendency to overblend and whatnot. And for the type of work that I do, my soft pastel work is usually very kind of realistic looking. I find eccentric little old rusty tin toys and stuff like that. I render those. And so for me, I like having the soft pastel because it's more of a powdery form, and I can manipulate very subtle little textures. And oil pastel has a lot more bulk to it. It's highly pigmented, but it also is very thick. And so the mistake that I've made in the past in trying to use oil pastels, I think, well, I could try to blend them and do things like that. I think the strength of the oil pastel is actually in building images up by making marks. And so that instead of trying to blend colors together by, stomps or your finger or something like that, or you could use tricks like use a little bit of mineral oil or something like that. I want to concentrate on just keep it really simple, and we're just going to be making marks. And so we're going to build our images up, our flowers up by making marks rather than more traditional kind of drawing things. And I think that's really important, is to kind of make yourself aware of what the inherent characteristics are of a material, and then try to play to that strength rather than thinking, oh, I gotta master this by making these materials do what I want them to. I think it's better to kind of have this relationship with your materials where you learn what they can do and you figure out how you can use those. So I just want to make marks today. And so I will start off with a couple little exercises to get you limbered up. It's almost like going to the gym for your workout. We want to warm up first, and then we'll start building up some techniques, a couple quick techniques, and then maybe we'll do a couple individual flowers, and then maybe the whole bouquet or something. So you can see I've got the whole. It's my living room studio, and so I've got an assortment of flowers, and so we're all set up. So if you want to switch me to the camera, I have a new setup here, and so in order for you to get the most detail, I have my camera set really close to where I'm going to be working, and I also will be able to occasionally maybe move over and swing the camera around. So it isn't going to be flawless in terms of technology, but I hope it's going to be effective, which is the most important thing. Okay, so I'm going to open up my box of pastels. I've got the 24 colors here. And the first thing I want to do is talk about working on black. Generally, people automatically go to white paper, and you have a tendency then to work from your paper is already the highlight. That's the brightest value that you're going to get. And then you build up to adding more and more pigment to make the darker colors. Well, with working on a black surface, these are your deepest shadows. And that's what's going to make things very dramatic in terms of the effect of what we're going to be doing. But just to talk a little bit about that whole principle. So if I want a really bright color, I have to make really heavy marks, and I have to put a very heavy deposit. And as I mentioned earlier, that if you are looking around for any kind of reference to oil pastel tutorials, a lot of time they'll call it oil pastel painting, because what you're doing is applying the pigment in a similar way of applying pigment with a brush. It's not so much like the drawing. So this is the bright part of it. And then if I lighten up on the pressure and I take advantage of the texture of the paper, then I get a darker tone, and then a little bit less pressure and a little less pigment on the paper, and it gets darker and darker and darker and darker. And so then I can kind of get to the point where it's the black of the paper. So you're going from, the dark of the paper over this way. I suppose I probably should have done it the other way, start up with light pressure, and then as I come around this way, it's darker back here. And now what I'm doing is actually getting to be lighter. I think of that. I have a better way of explaining that. Okay, so it's just opposite. So instead of this then becoming the shadow on white paper, this becomes the highlight. And then since we're equipped with a white, I can get even brighter bits coming across that way. Now, when I was kind of in the last couple of days, when I've been experimenting and just having some fun, trying out a couple different things, I found a technique that I'm not going to claim as the only person to have done it, but it's just something that I kind of discovered on my own. Another thing that you can do is I can really load this up here, and I can also load it up here. Maybe put just a very light area in through here. So I took a palette knife, or this actually is something out of kitchen supply. I like these things to mix it, and I found that I can just scrape that off. So I can lighten the color by just scraping off the application of the oil pastel. And I found that to be extremely revealing to me. And I got kind of excited about that. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool, because then, I can kind of come back and put some more on top of it, and I can build it up this way. And so instead of any kind of a texture, I'm just mashing that stuff down into the crevices, and as well as layering on top of it. And then if I want to do something else to it, put another color, I can just maybe scrape a little bit off, or I can scrape almost all of it off. And so I can get a nice gradation of tone that way. And I'll kind of show you, like, I also then, I have a use for even the little discarded bits. So I have a tendency to kind of scrape them off, and we'll save that for later. And then if I have a little bit less of the pigment on there, then when I put the white down, it's not really mixing with as much, and I can actually even get a brighter white on top of that. So that's one of the things I like us to kind of keep in mind as we continue. All right, I'm thinking more about approaching our flowers from an impressionistic point of view. So instead of trying to be realistic in the terms of getting all the tiny little details and all that, which I do enough of with the soft pastels, and as kind of something in contrast to that is more energetic and a lot more fun, I like the idea of making marks. So especially if you've never really kind of used oil pastels, I thought it'd be very helpful for us to start thinking about making marks. So instead of being real kind of thinking, oh, I'd like to get a point on that, and I want to get a nice line stuff, start making physical marks. I mean, really put pressure and use your whole arm, use your wrist, your elbow, and start making a series of marks. So this one, I'm using more of like kind of straight lines, and just go on top, and just practice the idea that you're going to be making very gestural marks. And then maybe pick another color and try making maybe circular marks. So really put a lot of energy into it and lay a lot of that down there. And maybe after you're using a lot of force, see what would happen if you start off light and then whip it around or something. And start coming up with a catalog of different kind of marks you can make. And it gets you away from, well, for me at least, it got me away from thinking about going back to the way that I draw. This is kind of bold territory for me now, because I normally don't work like this, and I find it very liberating and very energetic, and I'm standing up instead of sitting down, and I find that very exciting. All right, so let's try making little circles, little squiggles. And then I started noticing, okay, when they overlap, then I'm getting a little bit more of a density. And this is the type of thing that we're going to use in order to get a feeling for overlapping petals and finding shapes that will build the form of the flower up. But if you kind of start working on your catalog of what you can do, all right. And let's get a green in there. Now let's see, what haven't we done? Okay, I was going in that direction. Maybe I'll just do some more of these. Maybe overlap them a little bit. And I can, you can physically hear. I mean, usually when I'm working with pencils, watercolor brushes, soft pastels, I don't hear too much action or too much noise when the pastel or the brush or something hits the paper, but I'm really hearing, oh, that's an idea, let's stipple. Let's make some marks like that. Okay, now, just to have kind of an interesting thing here, I'm gonna collect, I'm gonna take my, now you could use an X-Acto knife, you could use like a kitchen spatula, use a kitchen knife. Oh, everybody mentioned that. But I find this works pretty nice, or a paint spatula, anything that you've got, or a scrape, any kind of a scraper, any kind of even if you have a piece of cardboard or something. I'm going to start kind of removing some of that layer of the color I just built up. And that's going to be a lot of fun to work with. We'll use that later. And I've got like a little scrap piece of paper. I put these little oil pastel shards. So that way you can really you can really stretch your material. So instead of this just being a waste, it becomes a important byproduct. All right, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to look in this area in through here, let's say, and I'm going to select, that was kind of my light blue. So I'm going to take a darker blue, and now I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to come back, but I'm not going to go over the whole thing. I'm only going to go over a little bit of it. And as I'm doing this, all right, taper it off a little bit, maybe a couple in through here. Okay. And now I'll come back and get the original color and maybe kind of touch some of these areas up a little bit with some of these marks just around the edge here. And you start seeing that I've kind of made a bowl type of thing. It's like, this is like the outside covering that wraps around here, it comes around here, and there's a bit of a highlight up and through there. And I've got the same color, but it's toned down because the black of the paper is the thing that makes this darker. I mean, I start off with a color like this, but because I'm using a black ground and I have a very thin covering of the black paper, the black has a really heavy influence. And so now that's grayed out and it's starting to kind of develop this like, well, that's like the inside part of a flower, right? And so, you know, I could continue doing something similar, maybe in through here. I could scrape a little bit of this off. And that becomes a little bit duller, a little bit darker. And now that's kind of getting into the shadow. So it's like wrapping back. And maybe I could take a purple or something and then kind of come back in through here with some of that. And I'm getting some of the black coming through. So I'm starting to model these things so that they're starting to look flower-like. Okay, so then I've got not a whole lot of pigment down on there at all. So if I take a lighter color, like a yellow or something, then maybe I could start thinking about putting like a center in there. So again, you can physically hear what I'm doing because I'm not being gentle about applying this, you know, I'm painting. And as I start overlapping this, I'm starting to get these little thicker bits to stick, and then they start reading as a highlight. So I can really start building up a series of textural marks in through here. That could be like the center of the flower that's coming forward. All right. And then again, if I feel like it, I can clean my palette knife off and I can start kind of scraping a little this away. So it also, maybe not quite that much. All right, now you can use all sorts of, you know, any kind of tools, but this is an old dental tool. One of the ends broke off, and so they're going to discard it. And so I said, hey, I could use that. So now what I can do is kind of come in and I can scrape quite a bit of all the pastel off if I want to start kind of giving a feeling that maybe that center is something else. And so I'm working on a texture by removing material. This is much the same as like if you have a lot of graphite on a piece of paper, you can take an eraser, you can draw with an eraser. So what I'm doing is completing an effect by taking some away. So now all of a sudden it's almost like the center of it has even further, you know, kind of concave into here. And I don't want to scrape so hard that I damage the paper, but I can still, this is very heavy paper. It's 100% cotton, which is one of the reasons I like using it. It can take a lot of use. And down in through here, I'll let some of those little kind of fuzzy strokes come up here, but then right kind of in the center, I'm going to start to completely remove what's in there. And so now it's really starting to look like something. So this started off as kind of like a little exercise in making some marks and see, you know, if we can kind of warm up to the idea of making marks rather than fussy drawing. And so let's have like these little kind of like a little cluster of seedy things on the end of stamens or something. And let it kind of come out here. So it overlaps the edge a little bit, and that'll kind of help create a feeling for it. And so, yeah, just out of this very simple exercise, I've made a flower-like image. So we could do, you know, a similar thing over to, I'm trying to find my orange. I put it down someplace. Oh, here we go. Okay, so up here, we could do something that is a little bit different and maybe just kind of, all right, now I'm curving it in. Because one of the flowers I'm looking at here has this kind of really nice, interesting curve to it. And again, these little kind of finger-like petals wrapped around the center. And as they come around, then it's going to be a little more dense at the bottom because there are more of them that are joining there, and then they kind of separate. And then maybe a couple light strokes. But again, I can definitely tell I'm making marks because I can hear it as the material hits the paper. Okay, so now we got that one. If I wanted to, do a little change here, maybe I could take my knife and just very, very lightly. I just want to scrape a little of that away down there. So it's going to start to look rounded, a little more volumetric. And then I'm going to actually take kind of a red-orange color. And now I'm going to come around down here at the bottom and make the most influence that kind of deeper color. Everything's creaking, except for that those are not my joints there. It's my plywood on my makeshift. And maybe in through here just a tiny bit to kind of bring that color into the shadows so that you have a feeling that that kind of corresponds to what's happening in through here. And then if you feel like it, then I like is like I'm kind of basing this on flower-like things, but this is all out of my head. So I don't have to feel obligated to make it look like anything other than my experiment. All right, so now I've got that thing. All right, so in the center, you might do a similar thing. We could put, in this case, let's maybe make the, we could maybe make some like that, and then put really bright blue bits on the top of it. Again, I'm kind of making up my own version of flowers. And then if I want to give that a little more presence, I could decide if the light's kind of coming this way, then maybe these will be just a little bit darker on the side. So I'm just, just putting a couple little, maybe this is kind of in the back. To make this overlap that one, I can scratch a lot of it out so it looks like that's on top of it. I can come back, reinforce it with maybe even brighter areas to where I am thinking about. Okay, so we got that one. And then play around with the idea of adding some leaves, if I can find my light green. Okay, sorry for the, oh, here it is. It was hiding. I've used it and it's gone. Okay. So then we can start kind of thinking about leaves. So I'm going to just again, I want to be kind of making those shapes with my whole arm. I don't want to just, have my hand down and move around like that, but I want these leaves to come out kind of in different directions. Okay. Then for maybe on this side where it's possibly in shadows, I'm going to just kind of scrape some of that away. Like that, and I'll get my values by scooping some of the pigment off rather than necessarily adding to it. I'll be I'm just leaving the areas that I feel would best be the highlights and in through here, because that's going to be a little bit in shadow. So I can start getting some kind of impression of a leaf in through there. Then I can come back with a darker green and reinforce some of that. But again, I just kind of want to keep it more in terms of making marks. All right, so I think you get the idea of ways that you can make marks, and then you can use you can take some of the oil pastel away and add some to it. So we'll have that be our exercise. And then what I wanted to show you one more thing, and then I thought we'd just kind of sketch an arrangement of flowers and talk about the composition and whatnot, and just start seeing how far we can go. Now, as I had mentioned, I like the using my findings from scraping things off. So I'm going to find where's my bright pink, I think. Okay. All right, so I'm going to make a series of, think about the petal, and they're coming away from the center. And the center is going to be a little bit more in through here. So these bits are going to be curving a little farther away, and these are going to be a little bit shorter. Okay, so my underpainting, so to speak. Okay, now I'm going to scrape all that away. To here. And now I'm going to deposit that kind of down here like that. And this is going to be my palette. Now I'm going to pick a little bit of off on the end of my spatula. And then I'm going to press it and bring it down. Press it and bring it down. So what I'm doing now is kind of using my palette knife, and I'm able to get these individual little petal shapes. Okay, and sometimes what I'll do, if I really like the way that that's working, on a scrap piece of paper or someplace else, I'll just purposely create some off. I'll pick a little bit up off of there. I'll come back and I'll start applying it. And these are really thick deposits. So they're going to be very, very bright and very intense. So I'm getting some more of the groundwork done for that particular flower. And so they look like paint strokes. And again, we're painting with the pastels more than we're drawing with them. Should have oiled my drawing board before I got started here. Okay. All right, now the other thing that I found is kind of fun to do is I'll take for white. And I'll take some pink. Build up some. And this is just, something I kind of learned when I was horsing around. So I'll scrape across this way so I get a little bit of white and pink, and then I can start getting kind of a nice blending. And it kind of gives that a nice variation, as most flowers have. But they aren't always, a pure color. A lot of times they'll have little flecks of other colors in. Okay, kind of go over that again. So I like that kind of roughness. I like having a little bit of highlight. Okay. Now I'm going to use a lighter pink maybe on top. I can, let's see, I'm going to grab a little bit of orange. Scrape that up a little bit. And maybe make that a little bit warmer yet. And then start coming around the edge here a bit. Okay. And then I'm going to finish it off with maybe a really kind of nice, bright, rich, reddish magenta color. So I can come in like that. And then I'm going to draw that a little bit into the black. So I'm starting to get a little bit of shading at the bottom where maybe it's curving away. And then the last thing I'm going to do is put one more hit of that really kind of nice bright pink over the whole thing. But to me, that creates a very pleasant, just kind of overall petal look. Okay, so I'm going to build this up, scrape it off, then come back in and get a little more intensity in that. Okay, then take this brighter color again, and I'm going to put a few strokes kind of at the top. And the idea is that I want to make this look like it's kind of a little bit down below. Okay, so that's kind of a nice flower looking thing. And then I can take my yellow perhaps, and then maybe kind of put in a couple really nice little bits in there. And then I could take my little dental tool here and maybe make a couple little indications that there's some extra little kind of.
Franz, do you have any recommendations if the scrapings aren't sticking?
You just have to use a lot of pressure. It's like if you're putting it down there, I'm using a tremendous amount of pressure. So as if I have some there, well, first of all, what I do is I like to prime the surface of the paper with an underlayer color first. Okay, so I have the bottom and the top of the paper coated, with little troughs in between the texture. So I've kind of filled that in with a little bit of a primer. And then when I build this up, as I scrape that off, it's very thin, but as I bring it across, you can see how thick that is. And it kind of softens this up. It's almost like if you take butter out of the refrigerator and you kind of take a knife or a paddle or something, you kind of smooth it and smooth it and smooth it. It still kind of holds together as butter, but it becomes creamy. So by scraping that up, it's the kind of same thing. You're making real thin part. Yeah, it's a real thin layer that kind of gets up. And then when I put that down, if I concentrate the pressure there, and it sticks. And then I can get, another. I think I did that backwards. Like this is I don't remember which is the prime, but anyhow, I press it down and then I press down hard. And then I guess I would describe it, I leave up on the pressure a little bit. So it deposits it where I put it. And then let's get like a brighter color on top of that yet. So now, again, if you're using a paper that doesn't have much of a tooth, there are all sorts of, there's certainly a lot of black paper out there. But this particular paper has a cold press finish, and cold press refinishes to, if you run your finger over it, you can feel a texture. A hot press is a very slick surface. It'll work on a slick surface too, but it's just that this is a little more conducive to holding on to it. So if I'm putting a second layer on, I'm using less pressure because I want to just leave enough pressure to force it from here and thin it out, but not so much that I also take the last layer. And then let me get another really, really red, nice red here. I'll scrape it up. I'll try to get it at the end here. All right, so now I put this layer, I've got about 3 layers. So I really don't have to work very much at getting that to stick because it is adhering to what's already on there. So it's kind of a dab. At this point, I think I'm more dabbing than that first real. And then if I want to clean that up, then I can just kind of scrape it up and I can put it back down again. Does that answer your question? But you can kind of see how really nice and intense that becomes because it's just so thick as opposed to down here. Okay, all right. So yeah, we've had some fun playing around with it. Just to save time, instead of me doing some more and more, these are some of the ones that I was doing earlier today. I think this one especially is very juicy. In fact, maybe, I don't know if I can get it in closer. I guess not. Maybe. Let's try that. All right, so you really can't say that there's outlines or whatever, but to me, I just think they glow and they have that feeling that you have individual petals that are attached to a a stem. And this is very, very painterly. And I'm not an official, flower portrait painting. This is just stuff that I came with when I was horsing around, and I developed this technique for myself just this morning. And I thought, yeah, this is so much more fun than me trying to, to draw it. Now, up and through here, I kind of just filled that up with little shavings without ever even drawing. And what I particularly like is how mysterious it kind of looks. I mean, it's really nice the way that the black paper doesn't have anything in through there. And that whole flower is kind of defined just by these little bits, that are in from there. Okay, so now to take it a little bit further, this is another one where I started, just these are a little stiff, but I wanted to kind of experiment a little bit more with kind of these were flowers that made out of my head, so like I can use that as an excuse. So now that I've got all these other lovely flowers to actually draw from, let's just pick some out. And what I've done, I start with a very one I was practicing on earlier. Let me very quickly put a larger piece of paper on. Let's get this out of the way. I use blue tape, the blue painter's tape. It's less apt to shred the paper. I use some of the tape where I had to try to save tape and time. And what I do is use a white pencil or very light markings with a white pastel. So I had my white polychromos Faber-Castell pencil all set to go, and I seem to have lost it among, oh, here it is. Okay, I got it. All right, so I'm kind of looking over here. Let me just kind of move the camera. So I've got these flowers, and I like the balance of the yellow. It's really kind of a nice textured up here. And then you have a pink carnation, and then you have some that are still budding, but I really like the green that's going up and through there. You got some stems. There's kind of a lavender rose that's back in there. Maybe we can take a real quick thing. I like these. I mean, it's all full of all these different textures. which is very much of what we're trying to do here. So maybe, and I'm not going to try to be totally exact, but what I'm going to do is like look at that one carnation. And so I just want to kind of indicate its general shape. So it kind of comes around like that a little bit, and dips down, and dips down, comes, and then the stem, there's like this little kind of green casing. And then there's another one that has a little bud that started here. And this comes off of the stem here. So I don't want to spend a lot of time sketching this out. I just want to kind of map some territory out. Now, right behind here, I've got this really nice yellow one that's there. And then I have another yellow one that is blocked by that. Then I have another carnation that is in through here. All right, I just got to, okay, so I got just one that's just a green bud, nothing happening with it. And then over here, we start getting these crazy, I don't know if they're asters or whatever, but they're kind of a nice purplish color.
Franz, can you show the flowers again?
Oh yeah, sure. So right now I was sketching these out, okay? And I'm thinking, here's the center, okay? So the center's down here, and then they come out this way, and then they're almost, you know, like the ones in the background are the longest ones, and then the ones that are coming towards me are foreshortened, so they're more down in through here. So if I can find marks that would match that, then that's going to help. Oh, here I am pointing at the drawing, and there. Let's go back to the drawing. So what I was saying is I got the center here, and I've got these spiky petals coming out this way, but then as they come forward, they look like they get shortened because they're flatter and they're closer to me. So that will give me kind of a feeling for the space of them. So there are a number of them. So I'll just kind of very quickly indicate that we got some in through like that. And up and through here, we have some more carnations, but they're almost like little roses. So I'm going to kind of indicate them like that with their casing, you know, a stem. And this is all the detail that I need. I'm just trying to look for the general shapes. I'm not trying to get any detail, but at the top here, I'll go, okay, I'm going to go like that to remind me that they spiral in and they get lower as they come across. Then I've got some more of these kind of flowers. They're chrysanthemums or something. And then I also picked out what I was getting bunches of, I have something that's got a whole bunch of, it's not baby's breath, but it's, you know, similar where I've got little shapes. And then I have some more carnations that come up here. All right, let's stick with this because, you know, we only have about 15 minutes left. I want to at least get started here. Okay. So you can imagine that, you know, I've got the lily that's in through here, and that'll be like that. So I want to kind of look to see, you know. All right, so I'll make some of that up. Oh, I've got this great Gerber. Yeah, let's go back here. There's this great Gerber Daisy that's right here that I would like to include. So let's put that down there so I can see a little bit of, from my view, I can see a little bit of the center, but then I've got all the petals that are up in here, and then they get longer as they come around here. All right, so that, you know, that will get us started for sure. All right, and maybe I'll even start with that Berber Daisy. So I'm going to start that center is kind of a tannish color. And so I'm going to make some, and I want to keep some of that black because I like the richness of the black that will be in the background. And, you know, eventually, you know, once you get all the leaves and stuff, and I can start applying a little bit of color and scraping it away, but it still is going to have a really nice black influence to it. Okay, now in the center of that Gerber Daisy is a darker area. So I can, come in and scrape it and maybe even just kind of push it around a little bit with a knife. So that's starting to give me a feeling for it. And then very lightly scrape it away. So I get a little bit of texture there. And then surrounding it is, a slightly brighter color. And so, again, instead of drawing it and making it solid, so many of these flowers have this texture anyway. So this kind of stippling and the scraping is very, very authentic in helping to. Now, as you can see that some nice highlights that automatically came up. Let me get a little bit closer here. So you can see that some of these really heavy applications become like a really bright highlight. And so that helps create the texture that I want. All right, so then it's this really nice orange. So I'm going to just make these petal shapes. I'm not going to be fussy with them at all. I'm going to just kind of coming through. All right, and some are sticking up there and they're coming along. And then they're really layered in through here. So put more of them in through here. And then let's do the old scrape away, not all the color, but some of it. And in doing that too, it kind of creates this nice texture that is very, very much emblematic of, kind of what I got to stretch this out a little bit, not so much in through here. And then I'm going to come back with a bright orange again, but this time I got to kind of keep it more at the end of the petals. Because with the black coming through that part of the orange, it's going to make it look more like they're in shadow, which is more kind of what is happening. And then, of course, when I come in through here, I can make a bunch of marks this way and then come across this way a little bit for the petals that are wrapping around. And through there. Then, okay, as I look at that, scrape these a little bit, make them a little bit darker. And scrape these just a bit. Let's move them out a little bit. And then we'll say this is scrap paper over here. Okay, I can pick some of this up. And then I can start putting it that actually getting a sense of the petals by putting these pieces down. So I'm going to start building up the highlights or the bright areas. Okay, let me do with my. Yep, that's pink. I'm so sorry. Well, it's going to end up being a red one. What do you know about that? I'm so close to where I'm working. Everything's piled on top of it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get that. Okay, let's get back here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the red too. So we get kind of a little. Okay, so now I'm starting to get a feeling for the idea that those are petals. And with the darker tones underneath, it gives me kind of a nice layering feel. Okay, let me load up again. And then we'll kind of move on to a couple other areas. I get a little this, get a little that. Okay, and then, I feel like it, then, I could come back and start and a little brighter. I was going to mush some of those down a little bit, but it's nice and thick now, so those colors are really coming out. Okay, so that's the beginning of that one. In the back, I've got some of that little stuff that looks a little bit like baby's breath, so I can kind of start putting in. And these little marks, as I'd mentioned down and through here too, is that each one of those little buds that I put in there will have a little automatic highlight, because that's where the pastel is sticking to the paper. So we'll put a little one through there. Let's get a stem going here that goes to our carnation, and that's just a mark. And then that in there, the darker green. I'm kind of looking to see where the shadows are, like, you know, it's a lot darker than through here. Model the color a little bit to begin with, and then again, you know, the other thing too is I'll have, like, you know, baby wipes or something like that to kind of clean up so that I don't pollute. And I got to scrape some of it up, especially where I want it to be a little bit darker. So I'm taking advantage of the black of the paper. That was a little bit too much, so you can kind of come back.
Franz, can you please give us the name of the paper that you recommend for this specific technique, please?
Yeah. This is made by Legion Paper. It's Stonehenge, like the Stonehenge in England. Stonehenge Aqua Coldpress. And it's a nice textured paper. It's a heavy paper. It, you know, really can withstand all sorts of work. It's great for watercolor. It's exceptionally good for these pastels. And it's a really, really rich black, because when I was comparing other black papers, this had the richest look of all of it. Okay, now I'm getting back into the carnation there. Okay, let me clean this off a little bit. And okay, I've established kind of my base there. And as I look at it there, I took a little too much off, so I'll put some back on, but there. Okay.
Franz, could you achieve this technique on a canvas as opposed to paper?
I would imagine so. The only thing, you know, canvas board might be, as you can, well, I don't know. I just, most canvases, if they're stretched, they're going to be a little bouncy. So you might want to back it up with a board behind it or something. But yeah, or if you wanted to, you could take a unmounted canvas and just, you know, tape it to a piece of masonite, like I've taped the board. So I think that it would work on canvas. You could work on a dark canvas. You could go ahead and you know, kind of paint, instead of use, like, you know, you could use a white gesso, or you could find a black gesso, or you could, you know, have a gessoed canvas and then paint it black and then start putting this on top of it. Okay, I want to at least start getting some of the brighter colors in the, okay, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Again, these colors, when you start building them up against the black, are really quite nice. And make a color combination, make that a little bit brighter. And you can mix the colors on top of each other like this, and so that when I start applying them to get, you know, some of the kind of shadowed areas that are, or not the shadow, but just the brighter areas, I can get kind of a brighter pink than what, you know, comes with the set. Okay. Okay, well, we're not going to be quite as far as I had hoped, but I think that it pretty well demonstrates, the overall way that you can do this. And again, it's like creating the impression of the flowers without actually having to be a stickler to too much detail. So, what I'd hope to do is, like, there's some really nice leaf shapes in here. So I'll just kind of very quickly add some to give you an idea of what the effect's going to be. But if I can maintain some of the black texture, this one, there's a really nice lavender color that I could use. Well, let's make that a nice blue. We'll go over just a little bit, but this is the one that, so that's kind of in there. That has like a darker purple center to it, or and I can take either my little scraper. Yeah, actually, let me do that because these are very fuzzy on the inside. And what I'm going to do with these, I get some of that black to come through. And then in a couple areas, I want to kind of scrape away and really get a lot of it out, because there are also these yellow bits, or kind of yellowish bits, that I end up with having them all in my kind of ring it around, more of that kind of bright orange Gerber Daisy down and through here. So you can see, as even if I just am leaving it with the textures that I'm creating by the individual strokes, it's going to have a nice effect. So you have very textured, you have things that are a little less textured. I have it's kind of really nice, another one of these little blue flowers that are not quite open yet, but I like keeping all those little black lines in through there. And then you can put in brighter greens, get a little bit more of this stuff going up and through here, with some texture, black to come through. So it's really starting to glow. I was really hoping to get a nice. Okay, now this is like a marigold type thing. So I'll follow the shape that I've kind of loosely outlined there. I'm going to leave some black in there. But this is a very dense flower. And there's some more that are in the background. And very quickly before we end here, there's a number of these. But if I would have kind of pushed that in the background, I'm not putting quite as much down, and then I can come back and very lightly. I don't want to get rid of all of it, but I can scrape some of that out. So there's a thinner layer of pigment. There's a very thin layer of the oil pastel. And so the black is making that look like it's in the shadows. So then maybe this one is somewhere in between. And then if I use my white as kind of a highlight, I can kind of brighten these up. And then I can also add another layer in through here. So you can see it's just so much fun to be playing with one texture up against the other, especially on the black ground, because when you do scrape it away, then you get these nice tones, so you can knock things back into the background, and then you can use them full strength to get them to come really to the forward. Now here's the grain that I want to bring into here. So if I really wanted kind of a bright green as a base for kind of like one of these lily pods. They have these kind of stripes to them. So if I leave a little bit of the black in between, then I have a leaf that comes up here like that. And so you could get, very active with your strokes. Then as I look at, there's a shadow from one of the plants that's coming around here. So instead of like, taking a gray or something, a little bit too, it's more like that. Okay, so then, I could kind of get it so that it comes on each one of these little kind of striations. It has kind of, to me, it kind of has a more natural look to it. And then in through here, it's a little bit darker. It's a very light touch. And then down in through here, it's, so, a couple real quick strokes. And then it seems to have a little bit of a highlight right in through here. And then it's brighter green on the top. So in a very quick time, you can kind of set a nice feeling for the shading with just, adding a couple nice thick textured shapes, leave some black behind it, scrape part of it away, and then, just keep on building it up and building it up as you feel fit, so that pretty soon you can get these really bright, rich colors. And you have the whole thing surrounded. And then just one more notion about the background. Let's say that we decide we want the background perhaps to be kind of a blue, or now let's make it more of kind of like a neutral color, more of kind of a tannish color. Okay, I'll just do it up here. That's kind of a light pink color up in through here. Again, if I want that to be brighter to the corners and then kind of fade from having a lot of black. Especially like if I want to do a shadow, let's say we'll forget about what I have in through here, but if I want to make it look like that's a shadow, then if I put, kind of a nice consistent, kind of background color around some of these flower shapes. Assuming that, that would be flower as well. I like this little bit of black kind of coming through, but then I can, kind of this, come down here, maybe get some more shadows. I'm just doing this very quickly as an example. See how that really kind of sets it off nicely. And then if I wanted to start to taper off in terms of intensity, then scrape it away a little bit so that it's going to start dropping off into the corner. So it's a little bit more kind of shaded. If I want to add a little bit of color to it, up and through here. And then go back with the original color on top of that. So you keep on building it up, and eventually, you can get it to be. Oops, that was a little too. There we go. a couple more layers to get that, so it's a nice transition, it's nice and smooth, but you have this really nice kind of drama between the real heavy black shadows, the brighter highlights. I just find that it's a lot of fun because you're creating your own world, you're creating your space, even though it's based on the natural forms. It's more about your energy, your mark making, relationships of colors, and the different tonal things you set up to create the space. Okay, so if we want to switch back to the frontal camera, I will wish everybody a pleasant afternoon. So I hope that you learned a couple things and enjoyed anticipating spring coming. So we have a floral treat today. So thank everybody for attending, and get out there and start drawing away.
Thank you, Franz. Thank you, Michaels, for allowing us to have this workshop with you today. Hope everyone enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.